News reports of crazy parents doing newsworthy things at youth sport events are so common that there are websites and listservs that act as repositories for these articles, which report on parents brandishing a gun or attacking an official on the field or following a coach into the parking lot and physically confronting them after a game. While sideline rage events seem to reveal some of the darker aspects of human nature, before we deem all soccer moms and dads guilty by association, let's put some facts on the table. About 25 million children and adolescents participate in agency-sponsored, organized youth sport programs like Little League Baseball or Pop Warner each year, in addition to the millions of children and adolescents who participate in school sports. So this means that there are millions and millions of parents who attend youth sport events each year. And without parents driving their children to practices and games, paying league fees and participating in fundraisers, and sometimes serving as coaches and officials, youth sport as we know it would not exist. And as it turns out, it seems like these sensational news stories provide a distorted view of parental behavior at youth sport events. For example, my research assistants and I observed over 100 youth hockey games, and we didn't observe anything even remotely newsworthy. But we did see plenty of anger on display, and sometimes the target of the anger was clear, but not always. So in a separate study, my colleague Nicole Lavoie and I asked parents to recall a time where they got angry at a youth sport event, and to share their stories with us. After analyzing the data, it appeared that there were relatively few targets of parental anger and relatively few triggers that cause parents to get angry while watching their children participate in youth sport. The targets of parental anger are always people: coaches, officials, athletes, or other parents. And the triggers always involve some perceived wrong, which fall into three categories: injustice, incompetence, and lack of care. About 20% of the stories involved parents getting angry at officials. Most of the time they got angry at referees because they thought the referee was incompetent, not knowing the rules or not enforcing the rules correctly, and sometimes explained that the referees are often just kids themselves, but they got angry at them nonetheless. Occasionally, parents reported getting angry at officials for being unjust, basically sticking it to their kids' team on purpose, not because they didn't know the rules or weren't very good at applying the rules, but because the parents believed they were giving preferential treatment to the other team or were acting upon a grudge against their team. More than a third of the stories involve parents getting angry at their child's coach. Most often the parent got mad at the coach for being incompetent, showing up late, making bad decisions, and lacking the knowledge to coach the team at a level that satisfied the parents' expectations. And sometimes parents reported getting angry because they thought the coach did something that was unfair, like providing unequal playing time, favoring more talented players, or favoring their own child. But parents also got mad at coaches because they did something that the parent thought was uncaring, like engaging in unsportsmanlike conduct, such as taunting the other team, using profanity and cheering in obnoxious or excessive ways, or encouraging their players to engage in unsportsmanlike conduct, like breaking rules or engaging in excessively rough play. By criticizing or yelling at their young athletes, criticizing or yelling at the referee, or getting involved in a physical altercation with another adult. When parents reported getting angry at the young athletes, they got mad because their child engaged in some sort of unsportsmanlike conduct, like taking a cheap shot in a contact sport to intentionally hurt someone, acting disrespectfully or boasting, using profanity, or displaying a bad attitude. The only other reason parents reported getting angry at their children was due to lack of effort, not paying attention and not hustling. But interestingly, none of the 773 parents in our study reported getting angry at their children due to poor performance. Parents did report getting angry at other parents, most often for unsportsmanlike behaviors such as cheering in ways that were mean or obnoxious, taunting, using profanity, or showing up drunk. The parents who participated in the study had children participating in all sorts of sports. But it's probably worth mentioning that these data were collected in Minnesota, where it is culturally okay to meet the other parents at the bar between the time you drop your kids off at the rink to get their pads and uniforms on and the start of the game. Parents also reported getting angry at other parents for coaching from the sidelines, especially yelling at athletes after they made a mistake, and they got mad at other parents for criticizing or yelling at the referee. A few parents reported getting angry at other parents for encouraging athletes to engage in unsportsmanlike conduct, for criticizing or yelling at the coach, or getting involved in a physical altercation. So notice what parents didn't get mad at. For example, they didn't get mad at referees for being uncaring, and they didn't get mad at other parents for being incompetent. Why? Well, I think it has to do with expectations. Officials aren't expected to care for anyone. They're expected to be a bit like the guards at Buckingham Palace, stoic, unemotional, and kind of blend into the background. Cordial, but not fraternizing, to use a term common in referee handbooks. And parents aren't expected to demonstrate any sort of competence as spectators. So in addition to telling us why some parents get so upset during youth sport events, these data also reveal expectations that parents have of those around them. They expect referees to be fair and competent. They expect coaches to be fair and competent and caring. They expect their children to do their best and practice good sportsmanship, and they expect other parents to not be that parent. The majority of parents reported getting angry due to a moral breach. Someone did something that they considered immoral or unethical or wrong, either by acting in a way that was unjust or uncaring. In the Western tradition, the ethic of justice has dominated for millennia due to the profound influence of the Greek philosophical tradition, the left leg of Philip Carey's personification of the Western intellectual tradition. And although the ethic of justice is also reflected in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the right leg of Philip Carey's Western tradition man, things were turned upside down almost 2,000 years ago when Jesus tempered the ethic of justice with an ethic of care based on mercy and grace and forgiveness. And make no mistake, these were radical ideas. And maybe these ideas are still a little ahead of their time because we haven't quite perfected the balance. But we are heirs to a tradition that has bestowed upon us a strong sense of justice, but also a belief that we should care for one another. And we expect those around us to capitulate to these core values. And when they don't, we get upset. Maybe this is righteous anger, and maybe we should be upset if a referee truly shows favoritism or a coach encourages a player to intentionally injure an opponent. Maybe we should expect more of each other when it comes to justice and care. But I find it a little more difficult to defend parents who get angry at coaches and officials whom they deem incompetent, because their anger seems to be based on unrealistic and sometimes selfish expectations. A Major League Baseball umpire remarked a few decades ago that the fans expect you to be perfect on day one and then improve from there. And while he was a professional with years of experience, youth sport contests are often officiated by kids who just got their driver's license. So logically, it doesn't make much sense to get mad at imperfect teenagers who make mistakes. But we all know that human behavior isn't always logical, especially in stressful situations. And researchers have demonstrated that when we are stressed, we tend to show less empathy to those around us. So when parents who are already stressed by chaotic lives pull into the parking lot in their minivan, they're susceptible to respond to perceived slights in ways that they wouldn't want televised. And umpires get it from both sides. Former Major League Baseball umpire Joe Luciano said that umpiring is best described as the profession of standing between two 7-year-olds with one ice cream cone. In the 30 years I've been involved in youth sport, I've seen a few officials who seem to go into the field, so to speak, because they want to be in charge of something. But the vast majority of officials I've been around do the job because they love the sport, even though it's a thankless task. Joe Luciano once said, "What I really hate about umpiring is that we never win. We don't walk off the field with a grin on our faces." And youth sport teams are more often than not coached by the one or two parents who are willing to volunteer. And by the way, 9 out of 10 youth sport coaches in the United States have no formal training in coaching whatsoever, not even a weekend coaching clinic. It's interesting that as a whole, the parents in our study seem to realize that their kids will make mistakes, which is why there wasn't a single response coded as athlete incompetence. But some parents did get angry at officials, many of whom are kids themselves, for making mistakes. So it might help parents to know going in that officials will make mistakes. But since many of these officials are or were once kids, parents can take solace in the fact that they aren't the only parent who raised an imperfect child. By the way, I don't think that parents get angry and sometimes act in inappropriate ways because they're living vicariously through their children. This non-explanation is kind of a pet peeve of mine. I think it has more to do with the fact that parents want to provide for and protect their offspring, provide them with the resources and the experiences that will help them succeed in life, and protect them from the dangers along the way. But the emotions of youth sport can cause these natural instincts to go haywire at times. After all, watching a child participate in a youth sport event can be a really emotional experience for parents, which is why former Major League Baseball player Earl Wilson said, "For the parents of a little leaguer, a baseball game is simply a nervous breakdown divided into innings." Much of the anger that parents experience at youth sport events seems to derive from their desire to protect their children from disappointing experiences. The instinct to protect children is natural and understandable and admirable, but some parents grossly overestimate how distressing it will be if their 9-year-old loses a Little League game. Please don't get angry at me for saying this, but for their own sake and for the sake of their children, some parents might want to shift their paradigm a bit and accept the reality that youth sport, like the rest of life, is an experience. Maybe not a perfect experience, maybe not even a good experience, but it's an experience. And our experiences make us what we are. And sometimes the not so good experiences are good for kids, because iron isn't sharpened with a gentle cloth.